I'm also really interested in biographies that are not so much about famous people, but are about what people we might call ordinary everyday people, a little like ourselves. People who have left some kind of archival trace, but perhaps something that's not very substantial. So there are lots of gaps in their record. So for example, when I was writing The Convict's Daughter, my first book, which is a speculative biography, I had lots of information about Mary Ann Gill and her elopement and the abduction trial that followed. So I could write all of that in a lot of detail. But I knew that after the abduction trial, she somehow ended up in California with the man that she eloped with, married him, and had a wonderful life. I had no archival information for how she went from the court case to marrying him and going off to California to the gold rush. So I had to do a lot of research to fill into that spaces. And these days that's what's happening a lot. We get a lot of people who are trying to write the history of little known people who have only left partial, patchy, scanty records and only archival traces. And we are starting to, if you like, feel into the silences, to feel the gaps, and to think carefully and creatively about how to fill them. And to do that, we're using what is called informed imagination. Informed imagination. So yes, we are trying to imagine the best way to fill that gap so the story can keep going, but we draw on huge amounts of contextual information. So for example, when Mary Ann Gill was standing in the court having to give evidence against the man she wanted to marry, and she was agitated, and I knew that she was crying. I didn't know what gloves she was wearing. I didn't know the colour of her dress, but I could research the historical period, and I could find out what were the colours of that season, what was the style of dress, and I could start to bring the scene alive, bring the moment alive. And I could make other decisions along the way to fill in the gaps, to work out what was most likely going to happen. And speculative biographers do that in a way that lets their reader know when they're making decisions and why and how they've made the decision. And for that reason, it's still considered a biography, even though it is using biographical license or poetic license to fill in the gaps.